Hi! Welcome to Legal Penguin, the show where I read and summarize a legal case so you don't have to. You don't have to. Unless, of course, you want to. But now, you've got the choice. I am your host, not a legal practitioner, and anything that is said on Legal Penguin is not and should not be taken as legal advice. This is all just information that's available to the public. It's on the internet. Before we get started today, there are a few things that I feel I should explain because these are the things that are dealt with in today's case. The case we're going to be talking about today is the Bear case. This is a 2004 case that was heard in the High Court all the way in Cape Town, beautiful, beautiful Cape Town, and it basically deals with inheritance. So when a person dies and they have a will, this person is referred to as being testate. But when a person dies and they don't have a will, this person is referred to as being intestate. And anyone who dies intestate is dealt with in terms of the Interstate Succession Act. Unless, of course, they're black. So if you died and you did not have a will, then your things would be dealt with in terms of the Interstate Succession Act. But if you died, you did not have a will, and you were black, Section 14B of the Interstate Succession Act said that you had to go over there. Okay, you have to go over there. Over there, you're going to find Section 23 of the Black Administration Act, and that act is gonna figure out what to do with you. Okay, so you just go over there. What was Section 23 of the Black Administration Act dealt specifically with black people who died without a will? Section 23 of the Black Administration Act that dealt specifically with black people who died without a will stated that black people who died without a will would have their things dealt with in terms of black law and customs. And black law and custom at the time had this funny little rule called male primogeniture. Male primogeniture meant that only the eldest sons could inherit. And if the eldest sons were dead, then only the eldest sons' children could inherit. It was only when the eldest son is dead and they also did not have kids were the second sons or the third sons allowed to inherit. Essentially, we can see from this rule that only male relatives were allowed to inherit. So widows, daughters, and minor children when the eldest son was alive were all excluded. Extramarital children, so children born out of the marriage, were also excluded from inheriting from their father's estate. The general expectation was that the person who inherits everything would then take care of everybody else. But as we've seen time and time again, honestly too many times, what usually happens is that the person who inherits everything kicks everybody else out of the house, spends the money however they please, and takes care of no one. They take care of absolutely no one. And that is something that we are going to see happen in the case that we are discussing today. Nontubeko Bear and Vuyo Mgolombane were in love. They were, well, I would hope they were in love. I don't know them personally, but they were in a relationship. And it was never really clear if the two were married, but they did have two children, Annelisa Bear and Nonkuleko Bear, both of which were girls. Vuyo was a carpenter and Miss Bear was a domestic worker. The family was pretty poor. They did not have much, but they did have each other, and they could always depend on Vuyo to provide what they needed. Miss Bear, Vuyo, and their youngest daughter all lived together in a temporary shelter in Khayelitsha, Cape Town. Their eldest daughter lived with Vuyo's father all the way in Eastern Cape. This was a temporary arrangement. The goal was to eventually all live together in one location. After some time, Vuyo was able to put together money and purchase the land that they lived on. He was also able to purchase some building materials, and the goal was to be able to build his family a house that they could finally call their own, a permanent place for him and his children and Miss Bear. But before he could even see this dream become a reality, Tragedy struck and Vuyo passed away in October of 2002. Both of his daughters weren't even 10 years old yet. Following his death, Vuyo's father and Miss Bear just could not get along. They really could not get along. They were fighting, and Vuyo's father was harassing Miss Bear to the point where their relationship just could not be saved. It completely broke down. When Vuyo passed away, in his estate, he had the temporary shelter that they lived in, the land that he had purchased, the building materials that he had purchased, and also all the little things that him and Miss Bear had purchased over the years. So I'm talking about furniture, cups, spoons, etc. But the most important thing that Vuyo did not have was a will. A document that detailed what should happen to all of these things when he dies, therefore making him intestate. And remember at the time, because Vuyo was a black man who had died without a will, his stuff would be dealt with in terms of customary and black law. And if you remember what black law at the time said, customary law at the time meant that Miss Bear and the two children would not be able to inherit anything that belonged to Vuyo. The person who would actually be able to inherit and did inherit everything is Vuyo's father. Vuyo's father inherited the entire of Vuyo's estate, and he made it clear. He did not joke around. He was not sugarcoating anything. He was honest. He was going to sell every single thing. Everything. To pay off Vuyo's funeral, of course. It was for the funeral, because a funeral and a piece of land costs the same amount. It's the same amount. Miss Bear could tell that with the way things were going, she and her children were going to be left homeless with nothing but the clothes on their back if Vuyo's father didn't sell those as well. So she quickly applied to the courts, and she also quickly applied for an interdict to prevent Vuyo's father from selling the immovable property and also to prevent him from further harassing her. Because yes, despite everything that was going on, Vuyo's father still made sure that he had time to harass Miss Bear. Priorities. The two things that the courts had to now deal with or had to address was the constitutionality, so the fairness of Section 23 of the Black Administration Act, the act that said that a black person's estate who had died without a will would be dealt with in terms of customary law. How fair was this section? The second thing that the courts had to deal with was the fairness or the constitutionality of male primogeniture, the rule that said that only the eldest male children or male relatives could inherit. To no surprise, the courts ruled that Section 23 of the Black Administration Act was just racist. It was racist, it was discriminatory. I mean, how do you even justify, how do you justify a section like that? It was not justifiable. So the courts ruled that it was inconsistent with the Constitution and therefore it was invalid. The courts also found that the concept of male primogeniture was also it was discriminatory. You couldn't justify it. It discriminated against women and children based on their age. You couldn't justify it. So they also ruled that it was inconsistent and therefore invalid. Section 14B of the Interstate Succession Act was also ruled as invalid because it was discriminating based on race and color. As a result, the two children were declared as the only heirs to Vuyo's estate, and Vuyo's father had to then transfer every single thing back to these two children, and then it would be divided amongst them equally. You will see here that Miss Bear wasn't really given anything, and the reason for this is because Miss Bear was bringing this application on behalf of her children. Hence, it didn't matter to determine whether she and Vuyo were actually married, because it wasn't about her, it was about the children. And that actually brings us to the end of the Bear case. The Bear case definitely did change and impact a lot of what we have today in terms of how to divide a person's estate when they have died without a will. But the second case that I wanted to quickly mention that is often talked about when people talk about the Bear case is the Shibi case. So what happened in the Shibi case is very similar to what happened in the Bear case, except in the Shibi case, when Daniel Sithole died and he did not have a will, he also did not have any children, he had no spouse, and he also had no parents. The only person that he had was a sister named Charlotte Shibi. Because of the laws at the time, Charlotte Shibi could not inherit her brother's estate, and the closest people, the closest male relatives to the deceased, were his cousins, and his cousins were then made the heirs to his estate. These two cousins then went about spending the money however they pleased. They were having the time of their lives because YOLO and free money. And eventually this led to Miss Shibi approaching the courts to fight the exact same fight that was fought in the Bear case, to basically get Section 23 and the concept of male primogeniture declared as invalid and inconsistent with the Constitution. The courts in this case also agreed that Section 23 of the Black Administration Act and the concept of male primogeniture was discriminatory and inconsistent with the Constitution. As a result, Miss Shibi was then declared as the sole heir of her brother's estate, and those two cousins who were just having a blast, who were having the time of their lives, then had to pay back all the money that they had spent. They had to pay it back to Miss Shibi. And this amount was about 11,000 each, which is quite a lot. It's quite a lot. And that is the Shibi case, the case that is often associated with the Bear case. And as a result of the Bear case, you'll be happy to know that when a person dies now without a will, everyone is dealt with in terms of the Interstate Succession Act. There is no longer that funny, suspicious divide. Everyone is dealt with in terms of the same law. My 2 cents on everything we've discussed today is have a will. Have a will. No matter how small you think your estate is, have a will if you can get a will, because this is going to prevent your family from having to deal with so many unnecessary arguments. And that brings us to the end of this video. I know, I have been recording so long that the light at the back of Piplup, this is Piplup, by the way, I never introduced him. I know that the light is dying because of how long we've been recording. I know that the angles kept changing a little. The sound was also changing. I know, and I'm sorry. We are still just trying to figure out how to do this as professionally and smoothly as we can. But please just bear with us while we try and figure it out. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment below if there's any case that you'd want to hear, any case that you want us to talk about, or because I know these cases had a lot of information. So if there's anything that you feel we have left out, you are more than welcome to comment it down below. But until next time, good luck and goodbye.
Quack.